All right, hi. Welcome to our talk, More Feelings, Fewer Features, showcasing your indie game through messaging and video. I'm Dana Trabella. I'm the founder of Spoken Wheel Strategy. I do marketing, PR, and strategy for game. I founded Spoken Wheel about 4.5 years ago, but I've been doing marketing and PR for games for the last 7-ish years. I work on games of all different sizes across all different platforms, and these are just some of the games that I've worked with.
All right, and my name is Derek Liu, and I'm a game trailer editor. I've been doing this for about 5 years now, some in AAA games, but now full-time doing trailers for indie games. Before then, I was an editor for about 10 years, and these are some of the things that I've worked on. All right, so we're going to talk first about what is messaging, why you need a good message, some common mistakes that we see a lot, things you should do, some examples of good messaging, some exercises to help you find your message, and then finish up with some lessons and takeaways. So first, reason we're doing this talk is we're often the first people to know that developers just don't know how to talk about their games, especially late in the development cycle. And people frequently hire one of us, but not the other. And we've also run into situations where we were both hired for one project, but we didn't find out we were both on the project until it was over because we were never put in communication, which we think is kind of weird because PR and marketing and trailers, they're not separate. You should think of them as this thing that go together because when they're really cohesive, just the message is much stronger. And we solve a lot of the same problems, but through different means. But first, let's talk a little bit about just what is messaging. Messaging is just the hook, the secret sauce, the elevator pitch, the sort of one-line sentence which describes your game. But more importantly, messaging is how you talk to people about your game. Like I said, I've had lots of clients who they come to me for a trailer and I say, okay, what's special about your game? And they're like, I'm like, you should work on that first. But it's really important. It really drives how you talk about your game to friends or Twitter, press, streamers, publishers, and also how you talk to yourself about your game. And if the message is how you talk about your game, the trailer is how you show people your game. Because trailers communicate through visuals, sound, and music. It works together with the messaging to just form what people just know about your game, and also how they'll share it with other people. And some key components of your message in your trailer include?
Okay, so when you're thinking about your message, a core component of your message should really be the experience. So yes, that's what you do in the game, but more importantly, that's what do people get from your game that they literally can't get from anywhere else. That's kind of why your game is special in the first place. Similarly, we're going to talk about some feelings. I love feelings. So ultimately, people play games for the feelings that they get from them, and your game should make people feel something. Feelings are also what stay with people the longest after they've played. So once you've got this great message that communicates the experience and the feelings, you can also communicate it in your trailer. So why do you need a good message? So we're all hearing about how many games are launching regularly, and we all know that it's really, really hard to distinguish yourself in the marketplace today. Without a good message, it's just really hard for people to remember or find your game or tell people about it. So why else? Your messaging also focuses your marketing. So yes, it can be kind of complicated to find a really good message, but once you find it, I promise you it's going to make your life so much easier and simpler because it serves essentially as this central focus of everything that you put out into the world. So if you're thinking about sending something out, you can ask yourself, does this align with my message that I want people to know? And that can just be an easy clue as to what you should actually be putting out there. Your message is also your filter for marketing. So just like in development, constraints are really great. That's also can be true for marketing too. So again, it kind of provides this lens to decide what you're putting out into the world. And all of your marketing materials should really help to communicate this message. So we touched on this a little bit, but your message helps people share and advocate for your game. So players really love to share the games that they find that they're excited about. They love to be the first to tell other people about a game, but they really need a clear and concise and easy way to do it. So if you give them that, that's super helpful. And if there's no clear message, then sometimes either people will like make something up, which may or may not be what you want them to say, or if it feels really daunting and stressful, they just might not talk about your game at all. So your message is super important. It affects all of these things, and this is just kind of like a basic list, but essentially it should be a cohesive and across all of these different things. So people are actually more likely to remember things if they see them over and over again, and people are also more likely to like them if they see them over and over again too. So it's super important to do that. So Derek's gonna talk a little bit about some marketing faux pas.
Okay, yeah, so without a clear and unique message, your game kind of doesn't sound any different from everything else out there. For example, all of these games share these things in common. And if they wanted to, they could have led with these like 5 bullet points here. But that wouldn't have really distinguished them in any way. And maybe it could have worked in their trailers because like their art style is very strong. But what if we just took away all the art and just left these bullet points? This is what it would kind of look like. Like if you look at these, would you think to yourself, oh, that game? I know exactly what game that is. So it's really important, the words that you use. Now, fortunately, that's not what they did. For example, like Rogue Legacy made a really big point of the descendants, and they all have kind of different attributes when you die. And then Dead Cells went really big on like, this is hard, you will die, and also just talking about how good it is to play. And then also Enter the Gungeon went just really big on like guns, and there's bullets, and then bullets have guns, and they shoot you with bullets. And Flint Hook went and highlighted its grappling hook and the pirate part and looting. And then Binding of Isaac went like really heavy on atmosphere and sense of dread. And a lot of its trailers didn't even have gameplay. And then just to, again, clarify the strength of good messaging, just look at the same style of like boring text, but with language for very specific games. See, when you look at these now, these probably all remind you of certain games because it's very, very specific. And these could only be used with a lot of these games that they're from. And now let's get into some common mistakes.
Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about the things that I see all the time. So the first is don't describe your game using other games. So the thing that I get most frequently when I ask people to tell me about their game is like, my game is if X and Y had a baby, or like the thing we have here is like, it's the Dark Souls of Animal Crossing. So here's why this is a bad idea. First of all, it requires that your audience is familiar with those games. If they're not, then you've probably already lost them. Let's say that they are, well, then they probably have a preconceived notion associated with it. And let's say they love those games, right? Then you're setting the bar pretty high for what your game needs to live up to. Also, if your game does elicit a comparison, then players really like to find that on their own, and you're often kind of like robbing them of that Easter egg that they can get. But most importantly, we're all really used to hearing this in a game's context, but if you take it out of a game's context, then it kind of really doesn't make sense. So if someone said to you, tell me about yourself, hopefully you wouldn't respond and be like, I'm my mom and my dad, right? I really hope you would give yourself a characteristic, so do that with games also. So we already hit on this a little bit, but a features list is important, but it's a features list. It's not your message. People ultimately aren't playing games just for this features list, and tons of games have really similar features, so it's not really differentiated at all. Don't rely on just game lingo and genre. So a lot of times when I ask people, tell me about your game, I get something like, it's an immersive first-person shooter, which is like, okay, and, right, like there's a lot of those. So yes, it can be part of your message, but it really should not be the whole thing. So with lingo in particular, sometimes it can feel really inaccessible. People don't necessarily know what those words mean. And it also can only kind of box you in to reach a really specific audience that just like may or may not be your target. With genre, I actually think this is a bit more problematic because people have really, really preconceived notions of what each genre should be. Like if you think about a roguelike or an RPG or any kind of genre, people have specific ideas of what that should be. And if your game kind of veers outside of that at all, then that can make people unhappy, and no one likes unhappy people on the internet. It's also just, again, not differentiated. Like, yes, some genres are more popular or have their day in the sun, but there's lots of games in every genre, so why should people play yours? So let's talk about some do's. Work on your message early. As soon as you've got a viable idea that you're super excited about, start putting together a message and a clear way to talk about your game. It can be a really, really good tool to just see if people are getting your game and if they're excited about it, and to kind of take the temperature on how the idea is resonating. So this is one a lot of people, I think, don't think about, but your message can actually help you guide the design. So we've all seen like a Steam trailer or something like that and then been like, wait, this doesn't feel like that game at all. Like there's a big disparity in how like the screenshots or the trailers are presenting versus what the game actually is. But if you think of your message early and you use that to kind of as a checkpoint while you're designing the game, then this disparity can be caught early. And if you have a message that you want to share, then you can make sure that you're reflecting that in the design, or go back and kind of iterate on your message. Which, to the next point, iterate on your message. So yes, you want a cohesive message that goes across all of those things that we showed earlier, but ultimately, before you get there, you want to try some stuff and see what's resonating with people. So at conventions, with your friends, on Twitter, nothing super formal, but just kind of test it out and see what people are digging. Describe the game's experience. So think in terms of like the color, the flavor, the tone, and the feelings. Ultimately, the experience is really the subtext and the heartbeat of what a game is. And again, most importantly, it's like, what are people getting from your game that they just literally can't get anywhere else? So a lot of times when I ask this question, I get the response like, it's a horror game, or something like very shallow like that. But what if you could answer something like, oh, it's the hellish nightmare of waking up over and over to discover that it's finals day and you've missed the whole semester. Or as an example, like with Boyfriend Dungeon, they could have just called the game a dungeon crawler. But instead, they say, romance your swords, capture the hearts of cuties, and level them up in this shack and slash dungeon crawling adventure, which is like so much more colorful because you get an idea for the feel of the game, the overarching tone, and the experience.
All right, and also when you're working on your game, you should show people video of your game being played. And I'm not talking about play testing. I'm talking about just taking video and showing to someone their hands aren't on the controllers, so they actually can't test things around to see what's going on. And then this will really help you find out if your game's visual communication is really strong or if it's really weak. Because if people watch the video of your game, they're like, so what do you do? Then you know, oh crap, it's not coming across. And then this is really important down the line for trailers and GIFs and YouTube and Twitch streaming, because like you're really in a lot of trouble if you're posting all these things on social media to hype things up and then no one knows what's going on in any of the footage. Another tip is just tell the player what they'll do, which I'm thinking like bird's eye level of what you're doing in the game. Like what is the goal or the objective? Not talking about like, oh, you double jump and you fireball things. It could be something like you're trying to survive in this water planet and build a rocket to escape the planet. Or you're trying to find out what happened to your family in your creepy Pacific Northwest house. Or you're a goose and you just want to be a jerk. And your trailer will help you flesh this out. But having the basic premise established for people just really helps prime them to know what they're going to expect from the rest of your game. The other tip is just keep your description short, 1 to 4 sentences. Brief and colorful is ideal. Get to the point quickly. Because if you just kind of drone on for a little bit too long, then it can kind of be like if someone's talking to you about their dream that they have, and people will be like, okay, I don't really care anymore. And it just really has to get to the heart of what people care about, which is what they do in the game and why. And also, the message, it doesn't have to be everything about the game, and it really, really should not be everything, because you need to leave people wanting a little bit more. Just imagine if you're at a convention and you tell them your spiel. You want them to be like, oh, cool, I'm going to wait in line and play the demo. But if you tell them everything, then it might be enough information for them to be like, yeah, I think I know exactly what your game is. No, that's not my thing. But you kind of leave it a little bit vague, and be like, that sounds interesting. I will wait in line, or I'll go read some articles. And also, these tips are good for your trailer. Basically the same thing. Make it short, get to the point, focus on the hook, and once you kind of get past the hook, then you can focus on the other things maybe which kind of overlap other games. And then, of course, you want to leave them wanting more, so they'll actually buy the game. And as an example of how that can kind of translate into a trailer, this idea of just focusing on the hook, is, so this is a game I worked on, Way of the Passive Fist, which is a brawler all about parrying attacks, and then you kind of nudge them over when they're tired. But more than that, for this trailer, I just wanted to convey the idea that you're this sort of untouchable kung fu master who just defends effortlessly and then just completely dominates the enemies. And it's kind of like if you've watched the end of The Matrix, or there's the tea house scene in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where there's kind of fighting people off with one hand. I just wanted to show this. And then for the middle of the trailer, then I kind of expand on the gameplay ideas, show a little bit of variety, and then show the bosses. And then by the end, I just kind of wanted to bring it all the way back to the central idea about being this untouchable kung fu master, where we just have this kind of final pairing montage just to show that you're this immovable object. And then, so yeah, this is just one example of going in hard on one idea, but next Dana has some examples of some messaging that she's worked on.
Okay, cool. So this is an example for the game Old Man's Journey. Usually we would just lead with the first sentence, which is Old Man's Journey, a soul-searching puzzle adventure, tells a story of life, loss, precious moments, and changed plans. I think that this one worked well for us because just in this sentence, you get an idea of the color of the game. You can tell that it's probably narratively driven, that there's some emotions, and you get a little bit of an idea of kind of what you'll do. The next couple sentences we would use either where appropriate or when people wanted more information, which were shape the landscape to create the old man's path forward, experience heartache and hope as you embark on a heartfelt journey through a sun-kissed world. So these lines essentially show you a little bit about the mechanics, which was really unique for this game. It also talks about the art, using this word sun-kissed, which I think is really appropriate and kind of beautiful for the game. And you learn a lot just about the experience and how you'll feel and the tone of the game just from really a couple of sentences. So this one, Hold Down, a delightful ball-bouncing spectacle. So this is 5 words, and it's simple, it's snappy, it's succinct, and the game was pretty simple and catchy and snappy, so there's really no need to make it complicated if it doesn't need to be. But just in these words, I think you get an idea for the feeling you should get while playing, kind of what you do in the game, and the experience of it overall.
Okay, and then I worked on the story trailer for this game Heaven's Vault, which is a new game by Inkle, who made 80 Days. And so they made the announced trailer by themselves, and they brought me in for the story trailer. And I asked them, what should the new trailer show? And the things they mentioned were actually these 3 things, which were what the announced trailer focused on. Open world adventure, every choice matters, and decipher a language. And I listened to that, and I thought, okay, one of those things sounds interesting to me, which was the decipher a language, because I've never done that in a game. So for the story trailer, we decided just focus only on that, and we kind of expanded from there. So we have history as a science, you're an archaeologist, decipher language and you put together history. Whereas like open world adventure and every choice matters, it kind of describes the how and it's like the very video gamey aspect. And this trailer, we really wanted to focus on the what and the why, which is kind of like the higher level view. I don't know if I can take full credit, but the trailer was well received, and a lot of the articles that came out afterwards just really talked a lot about being an archaeologist and translating the language. And next, we just want to share some games we thought that have very strong messages.
All right. Sunless Skies, Sail the Stars, Betray Your Queen, Murder a Son.
Super Hot, the FPS where time moves only when you move.
Neocab, an emotional survival game.
Firewatch, a mystery set in the Wyoming wilderness where your only emotional lifeline is the person on the other end of a handheld radio.
Minute, a peculiar little adventure played in 60 seconds.
And Papers, Please, a dystopian document thriller.
Okay, so we've now told you what to do, what not to do. We've given you some examples, and you're probably like, cool, but how do I do this? So we're gonna walk through some exercises, which ultimately are just questions that I recommend starting with and really thinking through to help you find your message. So the first one is, what are the emotions that you want the player to feel? So a lot of times when I ask this question, I get the answers fun or nostalgic, which are kind of like, again, really shallow words, not really saying much and sort of generic. So think of like richer words here. Some good examples would be words like infuriated, alive, uncertain of the future, skeptical of the people around you. You really want to go deep and be super specific to your game. How would you describe the experience of playing the game? A lot of times for this one, I get fun and I get an escape, which like, I know you're all going to be shocked, but that's a lot of the reason that people play games anyway. So some good examples here would be things like the first feeling of being in love, the awkwardness of being a teenager, reminded of times in your life when you've had regrets, kind of things like that. What makes this game different, really? And I add the really because, again, I get a lot of like struggles here, but if you can't answer this question, then it's a really good idea to like go back and potentially either iterate on your game idea or to actually spend some real time thinking about this. This is, again, ultimately, why is your game different than everything else out there? What did you create that's like totally uniquely yours? And how can you describe that in a way to people that's understandable and accessible? So these next two are probably my favorite questions. Which is, can you describe your game in 3 words? So this sounds easy, but it's hard because I'm going to challenge you to not use any words that you would like to, like 2D, 3D, satisfying, fun, adventure, roguelike, epic, unique, anything like that. And then that will help you actually kind of get to the heart of what your game really is. What are you most proud of about the game that you're making? I like this one a lot because it often really reveals like where the soul is of the game and what you've really put a lot of like care and attention into. So this can be the sound, the music, the art, the design, like anything involving the game. And it can often be a really good jumping off point for what your message should focus on. Why were you motivated to make this game in the first place? So there's so many ideas that you could have made, but you picked this one. So what told you that this was a game worth making and that you were so excited about it that you just had to see it come to fruition?
All right, in this exercise, just keep asking why. Basically, just be your own inner 5-year-old. We just won't stop asking you why. You know, why is this interesting? Well, because of this. Why is that interesting? Well, because of this. You know, why is that interesting? Just keep on going. Just see how deep you can go and what you'll come up with. And then Dana mentioned a lot of these, but just a lot of these words, you should just avoid them because pretty much everyone uses them, which means everyone's saying the same thing, which if you don't use them, then you'll be different from everyone else. So yeah, just take a picture of that. So then when you have your message, you have to think about how to incorporate it into a trailer, which is a whole topic unto itself. But my main tip is just focus on the hook as much as possible and forget everything else which makes your game similar to others. And like if there's time, then you get to that. because I think a lot of people are just afraid of putting the thing that is new first. And they're like, oh, I'll put the things that they know about. But it makes it a lot less interesting to see in a trailer. For example, and yet also try to show the idea without spelling it out. If you have to use text, it's probably not as good of an idea. Just try to have your trailer have no text as much as you can, and then people just remember it much more than if they have to kind of read exactly what the game is. And the other thing is, in a trailer, you have all these sorts of unique tools at your disposal. You have game capture, you have editing, you have music, all these ways other than words. And if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then just don't put so many in the trailer. Okay, let's go on to some lessons and takeaways. Again, messaging, it's a key part of the process. Do it early, check it often. It should be one of the very first things that you do. And it's often the first experience that people have with your game, just hearing about it. Messaging simplifies by providing constraints and focus. If you find that clear, concise message, it just makes the marketing process and design process, telling people about your game, a lot less daunting. So you won't be kind of caught with with nothing to say when people say, what's your game? And you'll also feel more confident about why your game is special, which will get people excited. And then always refer back to your message. It's your guide, it's your roadmap for all your marketing, all these things. The more cohesive, the more likely folks are to remember it and repeat it.
Cool. So workshop your message. You are at GDC, which is a great place to test and try out your message on people, but also other conventions, Twitter, forums, all good places to gauge the temperature. Show people video of your game early. So yes, of course, be strategic with it. But again, an excellent gauge on if people are understanding what the experience or flavor is of your game and if it's resonating. And please coordinate your messaging and your videos. They're much more powerful and impactful if they go together and tell the same story. Thanks.
Do we have time for questions? Okay.
Yeah? Oh.
A little time. Please line up at the microphones.
Got 3 minutes. Talk fast.
Hello. Something I found really interesting that you're talking about is shaping your message to as concisely a message that you can. Do you have any recommendations for creating different versions of that message depending on who you're talking to, or making it one sentence versus 3 sentences?
Yeah. That's a really good question. That's a good thing to do. I would say generally with social media, you want to be super short and succinct. I would say similarly with a website, you want to have a one-liner. I think it's always a good idea to have just a one-liner that's easy, simple. You can always say it out of your mouth, and then to have 2 to 3 more sentences you can tack on. And I also think that certain places like a press kit, you can be more verbose, but anything that's a first line of defense, I'd make super short.
Okay, thank you.
No questions? You're all total wizards. Okay, cool.
Thanks
I
for
guess
coming.
That's it. Thanks.